Okay. So look, we got a great crowd today, and I want to welcome everybody to the Cowcatcher Division February meeting. And speaking of a great crowd, I want to make sure I bring this up. Last month in January, we had 57 people at this meeting, and that's the most we've had for the last 2 years. So thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. It's always better when everybody's here. We got another great program today with all the normal features, including Deal or Dud and show and tell, things like that. And we also have a program put on by Harold Berenzwieg called Grain Transport and the Railroads from Farm to Terminal Elevator. So that should be a terrific program, and I hope you're all looking forward to it. I also want to take this opportunity, although Don's not here, I did send him an email thanking him for his layout design clinic last month. I'm sure we got a lot of great concepts out of that, and everybody took a lot of stuff home that they could use. As always, I want to thank Texas Western for letting us use their facility. And David Crumpton, do you have any announcements?
I do. Good morning, everybody. I hope all is well. It's exciting to see the house full. It really is. How many are here for the first time? Anybody here for the first time? You're all veterans. Good, except you two. Yeah, right. If I'm not wrong, I think you guys were the ones that laid the brick for this building. So we're glad you're here. After the break or after the end of the meeting, if you want to take time to go around and look at some of the new things that have been added to the layout, every week something's different. Something's been added. It might be a building or a new piece of track, but go around and take a look and see how things are coming along. The other thing I wanted to mention, over here on the north side of the building, which is right over there, you'll see a 3-piece layout. This was a donation we got just a few days ago. Look at it. It's well done. If you're interested in it, it's $150 for the whole thing. So if you know somebody that's wanting to start a layout, there it is. You've got a basis for a really good starter layout. So $150. And right after the break, I have to leave, but Daryl Cowles, Daryl, you're still going to be here, right? Okay. Daryl will be happy to take your money and take a look. Thank you.
Thank you, David. David Cranda, who do we have attending on Zoom today? Jared Roberts, welcome. David, let's see, Robert Barnett. Welcome.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, how are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Good to hear. Bob, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, am I unmuted? Yeah.
You're unmuted.
Yeah, I actually wanted to get up there in person. I intend to get at least one of your meetings this year in person, but couldn't make it today. But I'm interested in the grain train, so I'll make more of these.
Yeah, we would like to see the LSR president here for a meeting or two. You're always welcome to attend.
Thank you.
The train master is here. Train master, do you want to say anything?
Well, good morning. It's nice, nice visiting with you guys again. I'm Division 3.
Welcome all. I'm glad you guys are all joining us on Zoom. Okay, David Grind, how about a treasury report? Aren't we all?
I have an excuse. Okay, so we started out with a balance of $2,380.19. We had no receipts in January. Expenditures of $36.99 left a balance of $2,343.20. And our certificate of deposit is now up to $23,479.69.
Okay, thank you, David. I want to remind everybody that in January, we started the surprise open house of layout tours, the layout tours. And this has been a real success for the division. Right now, for 2026, I have layout tours scheduled through April. And if we don't have more members step up and volunteer their layouts, we won't be able to continue this through the summer and into the fall. So hopefully, if you've got a layout that you want to show off to the membership, please see me after the meeting or at the break, and we'll get you on the schedule. If you have a small layout that's limited in size, where you can only get 3 or 4 people around it at one time, we can accommodate that, and we can have someone out front or at the doorway or at the bottom of the stairs, and we would meter people through it, through your layout. When one person left, somebody else would go in. So we can accommodate things like that. Today's layout is one of the premier layouts that we have in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I'm sure you're all excited to know who that is, and I'll be happy to tell you at the end of the meeting. Okay, thank you very much. As I mentioned last month, or as I mentioned in the whistle this month, the Plano Train Show had an attendance that was north of 4,400. Well, the final numbers are in, and the Plano Train Show actually had 4,800 paid adults, and there were 1,600 kids that came. So that gave us a total of attendance of about 6,600 people. That's the largest attendance of that train show in the last 15 years. So the Division 1 and Division 3 will be getting a pretty hefty check from the council. And I want to thank everybody in this room who contributed to the Plano Train Show and who attended the Plano Train Show and spent money at the Plano Train Show. You made it a real success. We have, I'm looking for a number of people who have some IT experience. So I'm going to just throw out an announcement to everyone. If you've got experience using IT or AV equipment, catch me after the meeting. I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about an opportunity we have in the division. Let's talk about upcoming events. February 21st, we have Pasadena, Texas. There's the Greater Houston Train Show. That same weekend in San Antonio, in Garden Ridge, actually, there's a model railroad jamboree sponsored by the San Antonio Model Railroaders. Then in March, we have March 14th and 15th, we have Grapevine Train-a-Palooza. We are attending that. The division is having a table there, and we have Mike Ross and I are going to cover it on Sunday. Mike Walter is going to cover it on Saturday, but we need somebody else to cover on Saturday. Jim? Okay, very good. You'll have to, you and Michael have to kind of set up the table, but we're right at the entrance to the Train-a-Palooza. Yes, exactly. March 14th and 15th at the Grapevine Convention Center. All this detail, the details on all those events that I talked to are on the website. So check the website for details and cost of admissions and websites for the various functions. I also want to yeah.
The same weekend as the March meeting?
Yes.
That change any timing or scheduling?
No, we'll just go ahead with the meeting. We'll have 2 people absent from the meeting, but you can go after the meeting, go up to the Plano Show on Saturday, or not Plano Train, the Grapevine Train Show, or it's open on Sunday too. Huh?
Anything changing on the open house, whatever you got planned for that weekend?
No, we'll stick with the schedule on that. Okay, so, and then the other event coming up in the near future is the Rail Fest in Galveston, which is sponsored by the Galveston Railroad Museum. And of course, we have a Valentine's note about the LSR convention in July. June 18th through the 20th. And Joe Lysing, do you want to say something about it? Since you had a Valentine for everybody? Where'd he go? Okay, Joe was here a few minutes ago. I thought he was going to make an announcement. But don't forget the Connections 2026 convention in Austin, Texas is on June 18th to 20th at the Wyndham Garden Hotel and Woodward Convention Center. So that's the LSR convention. Okay, let's go on. Anybody have any other announcements or anything like that before we move into the AP announcements for the division or for the region? Dwayne?
Want to bring up my show?
A show, huh?
Yeah, I got a little slide deck to show y'all. So when I took over the AP 13 years ago, everything was on paper all the way back to the beginning. So during one of our board meetings, and one of those meetings where minutes are taken and hours are wasted, I sat down and started going through and entering everything into a database. And I started going, and this has been a couple of years ago now, but I've started going through and doing a bit of analysis around our data. So the AP started off in very late of 61 as designed by 2 Eagle Scouts, and it works in a very similar fashion. We've talked about that before. So there's 11 different certificates and 4 different groups here, and 7 out of the 11 and 1 out of each of the 4 here in MMR. As of last I looked, we have 810 now. I was the 391st in 2007. So from 1961 until 2007, we still hadn't had quite 400 yet. And yet from 2007 in not 20 years, we've doubled that. So a lot of that gets into meetings like this where we talk about it, we teach it, we preach it, that sort of thing. The LSR has 65 of those MMRs, and we've earned 1,070 certificates as a region over the years. There's only a handful of MMRs who've earned all 11, and we have 5 of them right here in the state of Texas, and we've got almost that many that are on the cusp of getting it now. Myself, Mackie are both working on it. A couple of other people that I know, Mr. Palmer's working on it as well. So in the time since I've taken it over, the LSR had 754 certificates and 46 MMRs. And since then, we've done 316 certificates and 18 and counting new MMRs. And a lot of them right here in Division 1. All of the, like I said, next slide, please. So this graph here that you probably can't read from your seats breaks it down a bit. But what it really showed me was pretty much what I already knew. Divisions 1, 3, and 8 are the most active of the bunch. You can see here in the early years in the 1960s, there wasn't a whole lot of involvement. There was also in the paper records a whole bunch of people that I didn't know, did not know what region they belong or what division they belonged to. So I just kind of set them up as Division 0. So you can see some of these dark blue bars there. Those are the folks I'd have no idea what their division affiliation was. And then all of a sudden in the 1980s, that far bar out on the end of each decade there is Division 8. In the 80s, you had Gil Freitag and some of the guys down in Houston jumped up and started getting involved in it. Gil started really working on his 1979, 1980, 81, that kind of time frame. And Gil doing what Gil always did, led the way, and Division 8 jumped in. And what ends up happening for the next 15, 20 years is everybody in that area sees somebody else doing it. They get excited. They want to do it. They've already got a layout going. They get their stuff evaluated. Now you've got another MMR and they get the next guy excited and so on and so on and so on. Well, what I've seen in Division 8 and then Division 3, you'll see it take off again in the 90s when my dad and Doug Farner and myself and several others over there started working on MMR. You see that bright blue bar that sticks up real tall. That's us. In the late 90s, we started picking up. And then in the 2000s, we just skyrocketed. And that's because the same thing happened there. All the folks had a layout. They all got their stuff evaluated and everything. And then once you saw that backlog of work clear, we started seeing the numbers trail off, just like Division 8 has had. Well, notice in the 2010s and the 2020s out here on the end, that orange bar is y'all. From when Mike took over the division and we started talking about the AP and we started really teaching it and preaching it here, y'all have gotten involved. Y'all are getting your work done. But in the 2020s so far, in the first 5 years and 2 months now, y'all have done over a little over twice what Division 8 and Division 3 have done combined. You're riding that wave of getting that backlog of work, evaluated and getting everybody involved here. So, but the big thing, you guys are doing really well. Next slide. And you can just kind of scroll through these every few seconds. This just kind of gives you a breakdown of the divisions 1, 3, and 8. So you can see Division 8 here's got the biggie in the 80s. Okay, next one. Again in the 90s, but you see Division 3 starting to pick up. Next one. So there's Division 3's big hit. Next one. But notice here in 2020, that 67 is y'all, and most of that came from about 2015, 2016 through the end of the decade. Once we started getting these meetings going and everybody getting involved. And then there we are with the 2020s. You guys are sitting on 85 certificates earned just in the last 5 years. So you guys are going to very easily blow out what Division 3 did in its peak. I think we had 93, I think, that year, that decade. So y'all are on pace to really blow that out of the water, and that's exciting to see. Next. You can skip past this. Is basically what I've just been talking about, kind of some history of it. So, but this one right here is a quick conclusion. This is a breakdown of all the certificates that the region has earned so far. And Golden Spike has seen some real spikes over the year. And it is the most given out one we have here in the state. However, that one does not apply toward MMR. For the ones that apply toward MMR, volunteer is given out almost half again as many as the next one, which is scenery. We've had 151 people earn volunteer over the years. And there's a lot more of you that can probably earn it because all the work you guys do around here for the division every month, that counts. All the stuff you do to support the train show, that counts. All the stuff you guys do to support the NMRA at the train booths at all these shows, that counts. So be keeping a log of it. And get the folks that you're working with, Mr. Crumpton, Dick can sign off on it. I can sign off on it. However, we need to log your work, but keep track of what you've got going on. We are hitting a testing phase with the app. You'll be able to track your hours and things over the phone and be able to submit your paperwork online that way. And it'll come straight to your division AP guy, which is Mr. Mackey. I don't think is with us today.
Yeah, he's not here.
And then he'll sign off and he can prove it. He'll send it up to me. I can click on it and it sends it straight to national. We can still take paperwork the old fashioned way, but yeah, we're moving along in pretty steady order right now. But yeah, I just want to kind of give you an idea of where we stood because the news for y'all's division is really good. You guys are really pushing it. You're doing the work. You're putting in the effort, and it shows. And I just want to say thanks for doing all of that, and keep plugging at it. If there's anything I can do to help you out, if you got any questions on it, definitely let me know. But like I've always said, you ask Crumpton, you ask Mr. Packer, anybody that has gotten their MMRs, and they'll tell you flat they're a better modeler after they got it than they were when they got started. So you learn a lot during the process. You learn to think outside the box. You learn to work with different materials and get brave about trying things you'd never tried before. So all because you want to learn how to do something different, Yes, sir.
You learn how to not settle.
Yeah, bingo. That's really the biggest thing. The first time you start working on a model and you're like, no, Dwayne's going to see that. No, I'm going to have to fix it. That not selling the first time your brain says that'll do, and you go, no, it won't. That's who as Obi-Wan Kenobi said, you've taken your first step into a larger world. It really is the difference. And that right there is the biggest thing that will make you a better modeler. It's just not settling for something not being really where you want it to be. So we don't have any certificates to give out this month. So that means you got another 30 days. You got, today's the 14th. You got 6 more days to get some paperwork to me and I can get it in the hopper for this month. But congratulations all. Yes, sir.
How many, if any, certificates can be submitted electronically?
Right now, the app is still in testing mode. So we don't have anything up and running yet. I've been talking with Speed about trying to getting on board and helping him do some testing with that. But as soon as that's available, believe me, I will be up here touting it loud and long, and we'll do a demo of it or something like that and be able to do a walkthrough. Yeah. Right now we're still paper, but the best way to get me paperwork, get it signed off and scan it, email me a PDF, and then I can print it off on my side, scan it, log it, and fire it up to national. So, but keep up the good work, y'all. It's the numbers are proving out. Y'all are doing the work. So it's good to see.
Dwayne, thank you very
You
much.
betcha.
Anybody got any other questions for Dwayne? Okay, let's submit those certificates. Yep. It's not that hard to submit the certificates. Okay, so let's move into question and answer period. Has anybody got problems with their layout, or they got questions they need this group of experts to answer? Nobody's got any issues on their layout. Everything's running right? Do I hear that? Okay, I got one question, and I'm jumping into ITLA Structures. And it's a place out of Canada that laser cuts structures. Has anybody had any experience with those structures that I can tap your brains?
I have.
Have you? Okay, I'll talk to you after the meeting. How's that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other problems? Okay. Tips and tricks. Who's got tips or tricks? Okay, David? Crumpton? Not Crumpton, David Steckler, sorry.
Thanks, Dick. I respectfully disagree with Dwayne and others who don't settle for anything less than perfection, et cetera, when you're working on structures, cars, et cetera. And that's fine. It's a hobby of different strengths and weaknesses. I believe in the concept of good enough. No, I'm not talking about the Russian opera. All right. When I'm building a structure, I'm model HO, in my HO, if I've got a structure that's a foot or farther away from where I am, it doesn't have to be contest perfect, not to my eyes. Now, I cannot stress highly enough how much I admire people like Russell, like Mike Walter. I'm convinced they have a miniaturization machine in their garages that they take a real house or structure or bridge and shrink it down because it's unbelievable. I know I could never do that. So, in the spirit of good enough, the common zip tie. You'd be amazed what you can do with a zip tie. If you take a zip tie and is this on? Can I get this? Okay. On that. Okay.
There you go.
The common zip tie. If you okay. I'm sorry. If you take the head of a zip tie on the outer rim, if you will, paint it a dark color, not black, like a brown or something like that. Take a little silver pen. The inside. Can you zoom in on this?
No, that's as close.
Well, the inside part, just a little silver. Cut it off. Now you just have the head. Attach it to a structure. And
Put it in the center, please. There you go.
voila, you have a window air conditioner. Right there. Like, it's good enough. You can buy. Well, you can't see anything if it's sideways.
Right there.
It's in the back.
He's gonna get it with a different camera.
Oh, okay.
Turn it back around. Go around. Hey.
Hey, hold on.
Like that?
Right when I had it, you touch it. Yeah, just leave it alone.
Ah, perfect. Okay. Like I say, from a foot away. Oh yeah, it's an air conditioner. Yeah, you can buy a 3D one that looks exactly right. And then you got to pay for postage or print it out yourself, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody's got zip ties. And the standard zip tie is perfect for HO. It scales out almost exactly to an air conditioner. And if you're an O scaler, if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, they sell heavy duty zip ties that are twice the size.
What about the roof of an N-scale building?
Like I say, these aren't the big units you have on the top. These are the, and then scale, you're right, it could be. but for HO, it's a perfect, good enough. Nobody's gonna, oh, cool, you've got an air conditioner in your building. You're not gonna get in real close with a magnifying glass. Well, some of you would. I wouldn't. Anyway, that's my tip or trick with common zip tie.
David, thank you.
You're
Jeff,
welcome.
go ahead. You ready?
Well, he's heading his way to the
I'll,
front.
I'll leave this up here if anybody wants to see it on the break.
Yeah, well, he's making his way up there to the front. I got a comment though. Dave's very correct. Not everything's got to be contest quality. And from a foot away, that means it's halfway back on your layout. And that's part of the smoke and mirrors part of model railroading. If you detail up and super detail up that first foot or so, then everything from there toward the back can go with a little less detail. And yeah, that makes a great window air conditioner. That's a great find. Daryl was just talking about another guy that he saw that had takes the rest of that zip tie, and you can cut that off and make louvers for your diesel locomotives with it, which I thought was kind of a neat trick too. So there's a lot of little things you can do that will kind of get by from that foot and a half toward the back. Now, the only thing that has come along that challenges that now is this. That cell phone is God's gift to model railroaders because you can take all kinds of pictures and reference material and things like that. The problem is on your layout, somebody reaches out and takes a photograph with the photo backed by the backdrop from an angle that you never planned on having your layout seen before. And it's like, wow, I've seen pictures of Dave's layout all the time and they really look nice. But that one picture, he didn't even put a wall on the backside of that building. It's because it was never going to be seen. So, there's some things we're going to have to start keeping in mind now as modelers, or either that, or, somebody whips out a cell phone and goes take a picture of your layout. You brain him with a ball bat and hide the body somewhere. But, it is something to keep in mind. And he's really correct, though. I mean, there are some things, if you're not putting it toward the AP, if you're putting it on the back end of the layout, good enough's good enough. So.
No one's allowed to bring in a cell phone.
Hey, no joke. I was on a layout tour and I held my phone up like this to demonstrate taking the picture because this is how the guy was holding it. Two fingers on either side, two pictures across the back, and he's struggling to reach the button with his thumb. Lost control of the phone and dropped it from about 18 inches up onto a fine scale miniature kit and re-kitted it. Needless to say, the homeowner was not real happy. All of us were wondering if he had enough space in the backyard to hide the body. It was brutal. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and any model railroader on the jury would be. Oh yeah, any model railroader on the jury would find in your favor for sure. So yeah, if you are taking pictures at somebody's house, I really would recommend don't stick your phone out over the layout. And if you do, ask for permission first, and please use two hands. But yeah, that's it. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Dwayne. Jeff?
Okay. This is a wish I'd done that tip. A couple of months ago, I was at an operating session here, packed up my 10-year-old associate engineer, and we headed out, and I left behind a throttle. Last week, I found the throttle and examined it and knew why nobody told me they'd found it, because there was nothing on the camera case that was inside or on the throttle that said whose it was. Take one of those NMRA address stickers and put it on anything that's small enough to leave behind.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Anybody else on tip or tricks? Tom?
My tip for the day is that when your wife or significant other asks why they would schedule a meeting on Valentine's Day, my recommendation is not to say is because we love trains first.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. Okay. How about show and tell? And Brian, let's start off with your layout. Brian brought in a small layout he wanted to show everybody. And it's in the back of the room, and it's great. Yes, we do.
All right, so about a year ago, I started coming to NMR meetings because my wife wanted an internal layout for the house. And this is it. It sits underneath our TV in the living room. I just finished it early December, but didn't get to get in for Christmas because the house was already decorated for Christmas. It is 2 foot by 3 foot. It's supposed to be a little bit of switching in that it has a backtrack that comes in, does a loop, has 3 switches on it. As I've learned, I hate N-scale switches. They are the death of me, and this is a good enough layout in that it's not done, but I am done with it. All the structures on there are 3D printed that I bought on Etsy. Lighting is Woodland Scenic stuff. Learned something with the warehouse. It's 3D printed. And plexiglass, when I was putting the wheels on, I set it outside so I could get to the wheels. The plexiglass, it was a nice sunny day, opened it up, it was about 200 degrees inside, and the warehouse roof had melted. So I had to pop it off, took a heat gun to it and restructured it out, and now it's got natural weathering. That's pretty much it. I mean, it's late fall. It looks better when all the lights are out in the house because the lighting's real dim on it, so it looks really good when I got all the lights out in the house. There are people inside the warehouse working. Note to self for next time, put them in before you put the roof on and put a floor in because it's hard to reach in there with tweezers and hold them while the glue sets. Other than that, that's it. It's been a lot of fun. This was my learning layout. I learned how to paint N-scale structures with airbrush and paintbrushes, and do trees, do grass. Everything on here is something I'd never done before, so it's what it is.
Very good. David Grimes.
Where'd you get the case from?
The case I made. So everything on here, like even the plexiglass probably drives me the worst because I do not know how to cut plexiglass. So I tried to do the YouTube learning channel, and it's rough and it's not on there straight, and it drives me nuts every night. I watch TV with it, but it's good enough for the house, and my wife loves it and she likes it when it's running. So that's all that matters.
So Brian, you said this is a learning layout, implying you're going to go on to the
Yes.
make it a little bit bigger.
So
what are you thinking about as far as that goes?
that one is we're still trying to figure out what we're going to do. It'll be HO. I cannot see N-scale wheels. One of the upgrades into this layout is in my box of tools, went from 2x magnification to a 3x magnifying glasses. So that's something that's happened over the last year of making this thing. Exactly. Exactly. So I can't see the wheels till get it lined up. So yeah, I mean, it'll be HO. I've already started doing a lot of the grain cards. It'll be Illinois Central, Northern Iowa in the 50s probably.
Good.
So
Very good. Thank you. Nice job. Thanks for bringing it in. I know it was quite, it's not like putting it in a shoebox, something like Steckler would do, putting it in a shoebox and bringing it in.
one more thing. The progress made on this thing from February to June of last year was minimal. The best kickstart to it was going to Baton Rouge last year, sitting in a ton of clinics. I mean, the progress between June and November was, honestly, when I went to Baton Rouge, it was still just orange foam and paper. So, yeah, the LSR convention really helped me out, and just learning and sitting in a bunch of classes gave me more ideas than I thought of. So
Well, that's good. So that kind of means the NMRA kind of is fulfilling its purpose and its charter. And I'm sure the Cowcatcher division had a little bit to do with that. Okay. Any more show and tells?
Get those done.
No more show and tells? I cannot believe it. Okay. I know you've
Yeah,
all
Dick.
been waiting for deal or duds, deal or dud. So we'll go into that program. Trapper, you want to start up deal or dud? And I want to remind everybody, we're going to take a break in a minute. Make sure you feed the kitty when you get the donuts and coffee. It helps defray division expenses. And, Dave Rainey has done a great job filling in and coordinating the refreshments while Jim Davis is gone. But we'd like to have Jim Davis come back with a hefty treasury for more donuts and more coffee.
Okay, we got one thing special about the deals and dud. There's something different on this, so.
For a dud, is that what you said?
Well, yeah, kind of. He said that, I did, though. All right, you ready?
Yep. You want to pick the first one? Or are you going to pick it? Okay, you pick it.
I was told to shake it very well, so I did. Okay, last three numbers, 607.
Jeez.
Told you. Which one?
Sounds like a dud.
The second time.
I got
It's the dud.
It's the new dud.
Thank you, Dan.
Next, look at that, it's 607 again. 595.
See, I saved it just for you.
Mike, what?
There is. Pacific certificate. Tree crossing $10. All right.
All right.
And people didn't get that. Remember, the address has been changed, so I didn't know if y'all remember it.
So as a footnote to model train crossing, our layout visit today is up in Colleyville. That's very close to model train crossing. So make sure you stop in and tell Avery, thank you for all the support he gives to the division, and buy a couple things, please.
This has been upgraded. Oh my God.
Yeah, he's got a lot of stuff up.
Yeah, this verse.
We're Toys R Us for big got kids, right?
602. Thank you, Trapper. You're welcome. I told you I'd save you one. People pay me and look at the pocket.
So,
you know, it does.
Blank or one?
Ooh, 25.
Oh, Harold.
Yeah, I did have do a good job for you. Did a good job, though. All right, pick out the last one.
597.
Did a pretty good job this time.
No kidding. They're all over the map.
All over the place this time. I guess you want the last one.
You want this, Ed? Okay. You think so? I'll take that bet.
Yeah.
All right. Just throw it in there.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Trapper, for doing this. And remember to thank Model Train Crossing. They support us beyond imagination. So let's take a 15-minute break. I got 10:40, so 10:55 will, or 11, yeah, 10:55 we'll start back up again with the clinic.
Use this one. Good morning. Is the mic on? I can't tell. Yeah,
It
okay.
is.
Before I start the clinic, on a tip, looking at the radar with a line coming through, we're getting to be springtime. So those of you who have DCC, especially easy DCC, they're susceptible to lightning strikes. So, so if a big line is coming through, unplug your system. I'm speaking from experience.
This last fall lost quite a bit of his DCC system.
Well, I was fortunate. I only lost 2 chips, and it happens often enough that when I called to talk to Keith, he knew what I needed to replace. So just word to the wise as spring approaches and thunderstorms approach. Yes, Eric.
If all your electricity runs through one common area, put a surge protector that it handles that huge lightning strike.
Yeah, a big, nice, big surge protector. Yeah. Pulling a plug is cheaper. Anyway, this clinic is actually a result of 2 people who aren't in the room right now, Mike Mackey and Chris Atkins. Those of you who've seen my layout or seen pictures of it on the web, I carry selective compression to an extreme. And the operators, when I went out and operated on them, I got to realize that although I used JMRI for the cars to go different places, they really weren't specific to the industry. So I had to find a place, a home, so to speak, for my covered hoppers. Do I please stand? So what happened was I got rid of a generic industry that really wasn't suitable for any of the cars, perhaps just box cars. Next slide, David. And got Walthers and Rick's kits and made a little grain elevator. As I say, very, very highly compressed grain elevator as opposed to what's out on the club, which has large grain elevator complexes. And that was the beginning of the rabbit hole. Then those of you who were here last month, I showed the next slide, which was we were on a cruise up the St. Lawrence, and that was Quebec, and that was this half-mile long, what's called the terminal elevator, which was in fact still functioning, loading ships. So I went, this may be a message to me to learn more about the grain industry as opposed to just having covered hoppers go to the little industry and then go off somewhere. So I decided to go to look up the whole system. Now, the grain transport, when we talk about grain, we're not only talking about wheat and corn, which are the 2 main grains, but also rye, barley, soy, which is handled like grain, sorghum. It's a huge industry. And according to what the railroad is, it's somewhere in the top 3 as far as volume of transport. You know, if you go down to the Houston area, it's chemicals. But if you're in the upper Midwest, for BNSF, grain is right there in the top. So anyway, I decided to go and look and see what this industry was all about. So farm to first transport. If you go before the Industrial Revolution and you had a farm and you grew wheat or corn, it was mostly for local consumption. And when I say local consumption, it may have been for your whole family or the town. If you were fortunate enough to be within range of a navigable waterway, you might be able to sell it for external consumption, or if you were near a mill town, you could then sell it to the mill so they could grind it up into flour. But again, it was a pretty local kind of thing. And because there's really no great transportation, it didn't matter how much arable land you had, you could only grow enough to transport it. And transporting it was labor intensive. You know, counties in Texas are 30-mile squares because you can go about 10 to 15 miles by wagon and then go back and get back to your farm the same day. So that's what that was all about. Railroads entered the scene in North America in the 1830s. And when I'm talking about this, everything I say about the United States really applies to Canada as well. So initial transport was, again, labor intensive, horse and buggy. The grain was transported in sacks or barrels, so those had to be loaded up. And you couldn't really move vast quantities long distances. It wasn't scalable particularly. Next slide, David. So here's an illustration of what this might look like. A loaded wagon being pulled I think those are mules, not horses, but I'm not sure. Next slide. Excuse me?
Look like mules.
Yeah, look like mules, yeah. And now here it's clearly not the United States, but this was a worldwide phenomenon. Intensely labor to move it to further transport. Now, in those early days, transportation by train or by boat was the way to go because the road systems were only suitable for buggies going 10 to 20 miles in a day. Next slide, please. Here, this is 1939, and we still have grain being transported by sacks. This is a single sheath boxcar, and you can see a little bit back here, there's a paper lining. To transport, you had to use clean, had to be clean. So paper lining helped protect the bags. And this went on for a while, and there really wasn't local storage on the farm. I mean, all the grain was harvested and shipped or consumed in a very short period of time. Next slide, please. So local farm storage, transportation was horse and wagon, local elevators were 8 to 10 miles apart. That's an important fact when we talk about how things changed over the railroads. So initially, your local elevators were close. And local markets to regional markets, railroad expansion over time, over the late 19th century, linked markets. But again, seasonal harvest, strain, storage, and transport. There was no real way of storing things for a long period of time. And elevators is in quotes because the early elevators really weren't what more modern elevators were. And actually, technology hasn't changed a whole lot as far as elevators go. Next slide, please. So the first modern grain elevator was in Buffalo to handle transportation from the Midwest, from Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, to the East Coast where there'd be a market. And the main thing about the first modern grain elevator was that it had, and I'll show you some internal slide diagrams, an elevator, buckets that would go up, load the grain up to the top of the head house, and then it could be distributed by gravity to storage bins. So that was initially steam and belt propulsion. And the principal difference between then and now is actually the propulsion and the size of things. But the basic principle remains the same. You dump the grain at ground level or below ground level, it gets elevated up, and then it gets distributed using gravity. So steam-powered elevators in the 1800s, initially they were wooden, and the more common elevators that you see everywhere that are actually disappearing are the concrete ones. And the first concrete one was actually at the turn of the last century. A company, P.V. Hagelin, did it. And the first one was in Minnesota, and it was about 122 feet high, 20-foot interior diameter, and 12-inch thick walls. Now, if you look at pictures of elevators or you look at model railroads, sort of mine, you'll see the way it weathers in strips. And that's because the concrete was poured in rings, set, the rings were elevated, poured again. So the thing is stacked like a cake. So the weathering occurs because there are actually seams that change the way everything weathers. So although it looks artificial, that's how these things weather. Next slide, please. So that's the old wooden one. We have kits like that. And the next slide. And that's a more modern one that actually resembles my layout, okay? The main difference is they weren't quite as prone to fires, and they could be built larger. Now, grain dust is flammable. Actually, it's explosive. So you really don't want a wooden structure containing that because everything is gone. So this is the whole deal again, and the head house, there's actually here a dust collector separator to pull the air out, pull the dust out. And I don't know where this one is. It could be anywhere. It could be in Saginaw. It could be, if you drive from here to Colorado, go up 287, you'll find these grain elevators, some of which are abandoned, some of which are still going, functioning. Next slide, please. So from the turn of last century to post-World War II, you have a rapid increase in production because of industrialization of the farm. You end up having harvesters and all kinds of equipment so that a farm wasn't just a 40-acre deal. You also had consolidation of farms. Now, the country elevators started having trouble being large enough to contain the whole harvest. There was simultaneously, the roads got better over time, and trucking became cheaper than railroads and faster. So instead of having a grain elevator every 8 to 10 miles, the trucks could now go 20 or 50 miles in a day, unload and go back, and carry larger amounts of grain than a 2-mule wagon. And all those things promoted more distance between the local elevators, which is why elevators started being abandoned. The wooden ones are just raised or burned down, but the concrete ones stay because it's very hard to blow up 12-inch walls of concrete. So what also happened was you got what are called subterminal elevators, where the grain would go from a modest size grain elevator would be transported to a larger one. Now, why did they do that? Had to do with the price of grain. You might get more at a different market. Had to do with grain being blended for shipment. In other words, someone wants X grade, I don't know the grades, but a certain grade of grain, which would be a mixture of a lesser grain and a greater grain. And that could be done at the larger plants than the local plants. So you started having this whole intermediate level of elevators. Now, I'm not going to go into all the regulations regarding how much a railroad could charge for delivery, but that does affect some of the nuances as to how the grain got delivered. So the other thing that happened is these grain elevators became more sophisticated. You could take the grain, clean it, dry it, keep it in a temperature-controlled, humidity-controlled area, and keep it stored for indeterminate periods of time, waiting for the market to change so it could be sold for a greater amount. You also smoothed out transportation so it wasn't as time dependent that, oh, the harvest is here, we have to deliver everything everywhere. So the grain is more of a raw commodity than a finished commodity because it has to be milled at some level or transported somewhere else to be taken care of. So as the US and Canada became more efficient in growing grain, it developed an international market. And that changed the transportation. It was no longer local. It was no longer grain going from the Midwest to the East Coast to be consumed. You now had large markets initially in Europe, but also in Asia. So that started changing the transportation of the grain. Next. So Hutchinson, Kansas, middle of nowhere. That's technically a subterminal, intermediate terminal grain elevator. Now, grain from here, and what's interesting, and you'll see that the picture that I had in from Quebec had more than one head house. And that just determined how it was built. It was built all at one time where they added on, et cetera, et cetera. But this is this huge, huge facility. And most of this grain isn't going to be put on trucks for local stuff. Some of it's going to be blended and goes to New Orleans, for example, to be shipped overseas. You'll notice that here there's just a single track going through where the cars are being loaded. And again, they're being loaded by gravity. So a lot of this grain elevator is subterranean because the storage silos will empty by gravity and then the grain will move somewhere, whether it moves to the elevator to go up and be distributed to a car, or it goes up to be distributed to a different silo for whatever reason that may be, or this place could handle more than one kind of grain. It could handle corn and wheat and soy because all these things are interchangeable internally. Next slide, please. Now, this is a terminal grain elevator on a port. I believe this is in the Great Lakes. And the grain will be dumped into that ship. Now, when I showed the grain elevator last month, and I don't know who said it, but someone said something about, well, grain is transported in containers as well as bulk. So I said, I didn't know anything about that. So as an aside, 10 to 15% of North American grain is transported in containers, most of it to Asia. Most of it is soy or chickpea or non-GMO grain, genetically modified. And the reason that is A, they're smaller shipments, and B, we have all this stuff coming from Asia in containers, and now we have all these empty containers sitting in the US. And we don't export a whole lot to Asia other than grain. If you remember, soybean, the biggest consumer of American soybeans is China. So the ports on the West Coast, which are huge container ports, will transport grain in containers. They load them by gravity. The question is how they unload them. Well, that's correct. And I guess labor is cheaper there, but no, they have to.
Just on the top.
I don't know because I haven't seen them and I didn't find any pictures. But they have to line them. It's the same thing as the boxcar industry. They blow it in, yeah. They, again, with gravity assist kind of stuff. But again, just like the boxcars had to have paper linings, and I'll show you some pictures, the containers have to have paper linings. So it's more complicated than just using covered hoppers. Next slide. There is a continuing evolution of them, and concrete is more or less being replaced by metal. And turns out that if they're high like that, they're silos, and if they're fatter and what they're called bins, if it doesn't matter, they're still functioning. But here you can see they're elevated off the ground. You can see how they dump down here. They'll dump down. Next slide. So this is the mechanization of the farms that enables you to make all this grain that you've scaled it up. If this were 1840, there's no way you could get grain into a wagon as fast as you can do it. So the whole thing was a synergistic growth and made the US and Canada the breadbasket of the world. You know, the only two other places that really grow a lot of grain are Ukraine, which isn't doing so great, and Argentina. Next slide. And unloading, again, there was an evolution. The initial grain elevators were not really set up for trucks dumping a whole load onto the ground. And this is actually going to go down, and the elevator's lower level is in the basement, so to speak. Again, all these things are efficiency to scale up the whole system. Next slide. So the elevator functions: store grain, smooth out seasonal variation in how you then sell it out, clean the grain, dry the grain, and allowed for blending of the grain. Okay, that's the whole situation. So it's not just the static, the grain sits in one silo forever. There's internal movement. Next slide. So here's an elevator that shows, a diagram that shows, there's a driveway here, usually covered. Grain gets dumped. The elevator, which is a bunch of buckets, takes it all the way up to the top. And then it gets distributed, and it gets distributed to a variety of either storage bins or mixers, which are somewhere here. There's a mixer here so each bin can dump proportionally, and then it gets shoved back up. Back hop, a grain cleaner, all that kind of stuff. And it may be a truck or another hopper car that gets the load according to where the next step is. Next slide. And now again, we're talking about grain. We're not talking about flour. And that's a blow up of what the elevators look like. And most of them look like that. Next slide. So again, here's what's a diagram of a concrete system. And you have conveyor belts on the top that'll carry it laterally and then dump it. And then again, they empty back. And according to what's going on, they go back and then go back up again. So it's a iterative process. Much more complicated than I ever thought. Next slide. And again, now the modern grain elevators, besides moving to the metal silos, have moved a lot of stuff externally. So this is a drying structure. The old huge grain elevators would have them internally in the head house. And now, if you find some more modern ones, and I think I have the next one as a picture, you'll see that there's a whole system of drying it. And they use hot air. They don't want to use flame, because it'll explode. So they use hot air to dry the grain out. And they measure it, make sure what the moisture content is, all that kind of stuff. I'm oversimplifying it, but it's a big, big thing. And again, you have external power sources and no open flames. Next one. So here you have a more modern one and primarily metal, and that's a drying tower here. So again, everything's been taken out externally. Okay. Okay, now I don't know, we don't know if this video link is going to show or not. If it doesn't, it's a quick 4-minute video, which is interesting. We're going to see. If not, just write it down when you go home. It depends on what YouTube wants to do. This is a commercial. See, David, maybe the commercial will let us do it, right? Yeah. We're giving them their money. Okay, this is a European video, but it shows what I've just said.
Allows grain to be stored in the best possible conditions.
It's just a nice accent.
Allows grain to be stored in the best possible conditions. Located in Samsu, in the Marne department, Vivesia's grain silo can hold 43,500 tons. It optimizes the cooperative's logistics and service to farmers. The first step of a delivery consists in weighing and inspecting the grain. Several samples are taken directly from the trailer to analyze the grain and check compliance with Vivesia's quality criteria. The goods are then emptied into one of the 2 receiving pits, which have a capacity of up to 250 tons per hour. The grain is sent from the pit to an elevator that takes it up to the top of the silo. Once it reaches the top floor, the grain falls through the cleaner separators, which remove small and large impurities using sieves of various diameters. The dust generated throughout the process is removed using an aspiration system. This dust-filled air is first filtered before being expelled outside. The impurities and dust are sent to the wheat-fed pit located outside the silo. After processing, these byproducts can be sold to various industries. As well as the cleaner's separators, a grain machine can also be used to separate grains based on their size and shape. This is the case with brewing barley. The grain is then sent directly to the storage cells. Thermometric equipment is used to continuously measure the grain's temperature and ensure ideal storage conditions. Warm air is sucked outside to lower the grain's temperature for optimum storage conditions. From the control post, the silo manager coordinates operations and monitors storage conditions. Then, the expedition phase starts for the execution of a sale. Compliance with the customer specifications is ensured. The cells are emptied from the bottom and the grain is moved towards the elevator, then stored in loading hoppers or silos. The lorry is inspected for cleanliness and positioned under one of the loading pipes. The lorry is loaded under the operator's control. Once the lorry is fully loaded, it is weighed and sampled again for a final inspection. The lorry is covered and the haulier can then carry out the delivery.
So that's Europe, so they don't have as much train transportation as the US. So if that were a terminal elevator in the US for export, it would be dumping it into a ship. So I think that's really a good explanation to how complicated this is. It's not just storing the stuff. And you can see how now it's all electronically controlled and they blend it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now to move on to the railroad aspect of it, now that you know more than you want to know about the grain elevators. So the transportation of the grain really reflects how the railroad industry changed for any other commodity. So initially, box cars were used. Single sheath wood box cars were used. They used some double sheath, but double sheath box cars didn't last as long as single sheath because moisture got stuck between the two walls and tended to rot. So again, this is again 1939. I think it's from the same article I found regarding that other picture. Next slide, David. Initially, early use of gravity. So I don't know what kind of car. Is that a Model A truck? I don't know. Loading it. Now you'll see they're loading at the top of the boxcar. The door is sealed off. Now the boxcar is lined with paper. Again, labor intense. The sealing of the boxcar, next slide, is in a variety of ways. Now this picture shows, again, using I guess it's an auger to load up the grain. There's a wooden barrier that's sealed in that goes up. Now the boxcars are either 36 or 40-foot boxcars according to the era. They weren't filled because if you filled the whole boxcar up, you exceeded the weight capacity of the boxcar. The other thing about that is if it were filled to the top, how do you unload it? How do you get the barrier out? You know, the barrier is overlapping from the inside, so the weight of the grain holds it and seals it. Now, next slide. Quaker Oats, that was Quaker Oats. Here again, using compressed air and gravity to load it up. This is shelled corn, again, going in the top part of the boxcar. Next slide. Again, this is wooden. Now here you'll see the wooden barrier, 1, 2, 3.5. The wooden doors were not the whole height. That would be very cumbersome to handle. So they just sat on top of each other. Next slide. And there is a Burlington in the 40s. And again, 4 wood grain doors stacked up. So just think about that. The wooden doors, after they were used, had to be shipped back to where they came from, adding cost and complexity to the whole process. Next slide. Because the wooden doors were a pain, they also developed paper doors, craft paper with wood on the top and the bottom. They came as a little kit. Most of them had some kind of contraption to keep them from completely going out. So the railroads love these. These were disposable. One use, gone. They didn't have to worry about transporting them back anywhere. Shippers tended not to like them. They felt that the wooden doors were more secure. And again, the inside of the boxcar had to be cleaned and had to be lined. And next slide. Initially, they just pulled the door. Someone would climb in the top, pull the doors out. The thing would spill out, have to be distributed somewhere. Then they had shake the boxcar. I don't know where this was. Okay, next slide. And you can vacuum it clean. Now, it would take, anyone want to guess how long it takes to fill the boxcar in the days before blowing the stuff in? But, with people, took it all day, 8 to 10 hours kind of thing. And unloading it was pretty much the same kind of deal, if you want to say, from taking the grain from the boxcar to ultimately where it's going to be. It's an all-day event. Again, labor intense, hard to scale up, expensive. Next slide. So, along the way of trying to make things more efficient, before we go into it. So initially, boxcars were pretty much multi-purpose, but over time, they became more single-purpose. So you had cushioned underframes. You had boxcars that were configured to hold automobile chassis, and they started having permanent apparatus inside the boxcar, which then made them unsuitable for grain transport. So you can imagine when the harvest came in, there'd be an increasingly likelihood that there'd be a shortage of the general purpose boxcar, which was generating income for the railroads in some other fashion. So there was a beginning transition to making special purpose boxcars. And this was a, quote, grain boxcar. Has a plug door as opposed to a sliding door, so you don't have to seal it. The top of the door actually opens up. Next slide. So these are grain loading doors. So that became more efficient as well. You got rid of either paper kits and got rid of the wooden doors that had to be replaced. Additionally, some of these became double. If you wanted to have mechanical equipment in, the initial boxcars had the 6-foot doors. They didn't want wide doors because it meant the paper or the wooden doors had to be wider, and the majority was 6 foot, so it added another complexity. Well, the plug box door took care of that. It sealed it all off. Next slide. Now, I don't know how many of you, I mean, most of you are more or less my age. I had an Athearn kit that was a grain boxcar, but I'm 99%, I don't have it anymore. I'm 99% certain that the kit that the little shaker box kit that I had, this door was yellow with the red target, but it did not have a plug door. It was just a blank sheet. I could not find a picture of a prototype UP boxcar that looked like that, but I suspect the prototypes were double plug doors. Anyway, just thought that would be interesting for all of you. I know that the little N scale one out there has a little State of Maine boxcar. That was in my first tranche of cars when I was a teenager. Next slide. Okay, so what happened? Starting in the 1950s, they started using hoppers, covered hoppers. Now, the first covered hoppers that hit the railroads were the little short 34 two-bay ones, and they were designed for dense stuff like cement. Well, grain isn't as dense. Now, these hoppers could hold a lot more than the boxcar could. And they had, the initial cohorts of them had round tops, to load up the grain. And I'm not going into the detail of the gazillion different manufacturers who made them, but Pullman Standard was the first one. This is the first one of the grain elevator, grain hoppers. Next slide. And over time, they just got bigger, like everything else in railroad. So this is a 100-ton aluminum car. Again, round roof. Now next slide, please. And again, this is now up to 110 tons. And I'm emphasizing that because as the cars got bigger and heavier, it started causing some unintended consequences as far as branch lines with light rail. Next slide. Oh, back up again, I'm sorry. You'll note, one more, forward. No, go the other way, I'm sorry, David. One more. That's not a railroad-owned car. That's a privately owned car. And that happened with the economics. They didn't have to be returned to the host railroad. You didn't have a per diem was separate from the per diems that the railroad branded cars were. So there was a proliferation of private hopper cars, dedicated service. ADM, for example, the big companies had their own cars. Next slide, please. And this is now a modern 5,200 cubic foot, 110 car. And the later ones had troughs instead of individual openings. And that would allow for continuous loading. The car could move too. And next one. So all these things then contributed to the demise of branch lines. Several things happened that all moved in the same direction. The cars got bigger and heavier, and simultaneously, the grain elevators moved further apart and got larger. So you then had forces that were pushing against branch lines and also pushing for more larger shipments of grain because it was just easier now to do larger shipments of grain. And you didn't have to worry about single cars going amiss, so to speak. So this shows rail mileage over time. This here, actually rail mileage started going down after World War II, and then it precipitously dropped. This is 1970, as branch lines were abandoned. And branch lines were abandoned because the cars were getting bigger. This is primarily rural branch lines. Go ahead, next slide. Now, the same kind of thing happened as far as shipments of grain. So if you now had intermediate storage facilities that then had to move to a terminal facility, you're not going to move one car at a time. You're going to move blocks of cars. So this is single car use starting in 1895, multiple cars 6 to 49, and then unit trains, which was defined as over 50. And one of the things is, if you look at it, it's in percentage, it's not in absolute amounts, but the amount of grain moved grew during this period. So the amount of grain moved in 1985 was only a fraction of what was moving in 2012. So really, it would be nice if you had another graph that showed total volume of grain, which would show you how these things are really much, much higher as far as total volume of grain moved. But it shows you the evolution over time. So if we're talking about selective compression, not only is my layout vastly inaccurate with the small little grain elevator, but I shouldn't be moving 1 or 2 grain cars at a time. I should be moving, it should be a larger facility. So the club really, I don't know what time period the club is at, but they would be moving blocks of grain cars probably. Next slide. So if we look at Alberta, it's interesting, Canada has a much easier time for someone to find out volumes of movement and change over time. Their official publications are easier than the United States, just if you guys are interested in learning things. So capacity of elevator actually fell in time, but throughput went up because the whole process became much more efficient. Number of elevators fell by approximately 50%. Capacity dropped somewhat less than that, but throughput more than doubled. Again, so moving from boxcars, this is the area of, in 1965, boxcars were still being used, but they were now becoming probably less than 50%. So the efficiency of hoppers and the efficiency of the entire process enabled more grain to be moved with less equipment. Next slide. And that means it's cheaper. So this is a map of where the wheat production is. This was at the turn of this century. This map is, I think, 2002. It hasn't changed particularly. Upper Midwest and the Western Plains with some scattered other areas, which I am sure are for specialty kinds of things. I would think that the grain being grown in southeastern Pennsylvania's Amish farmland. That would be my guess. Next slide. And this is corn production, which is soy and corn are pretty much in the same areas. And that's the lower upper Midwest and Indiana and Ohio and stuff like that. Now I show this slide because it predicted where a lot of the branch lines disappeared. And next slide, I think, is my, okay. So this is, again, railroads built, and this doesn't really include the branch lines, but it shows how the railroads really are in the Midwest here. And when they were originally built, that's in 1890, that's a lot of branch lines and stuff to get all that grain moving, mostly East Coast, somewhat to the West Coast. Go ahead. Okay, case study, Rock Island, our bankrupt railroad, one of the biggies that faded away. As farms consolidated, there were fewer shippers per mile. The combine, you needed bigger elevators because they were combined. So the number of elevators on a branch line decreased. Number of carloads per branch line decreased, became uneconomical to supply it. And not only that, if you wanted to supply it, you had to upgrade it. So it became financially ridiculously difficult. Next slide. Additionally, with shorter than 50 miles, it was cheaper to transport by truck, excuse me. So the trucks went further to larger grain elevators, paved farm to market roads. You know, if any of you are from the Northeast, right? Yeah, right. So you know what US 6 looks like in Connecticut, and compare it to any farm to market road down here? The farm to market roads in high production areas of the Midwest are a whole lot better than primary roads in the Northeast. Makes it much cheaper to transport things. The grain elevators installed truck dumps, which made it easier for a large truck to get rid of its cargo quickly. And everything contributed to consolidation. Go ahead, next slide. So it was a snowball effect. I don't have to go through that. But basically, all these branch lines became worthless. Now, as opposed to the Santa Fe and the Burlington Northern and actually NP and Great Northern, those railroads quickly recognized this process early on, and they encouraged grain elevators to be built near their main lines. Additionally, the ones in the north had the ability to have long haul grain to the ports. So it became a very lucrative long distance haul. So they didn't suffer what Rock Island did. And if you look at the original Rock Island line back before all this happened, it really didn't have many long main lines. It had what, from Chicago to Tucumcari? And all the others were just short lines servicing their branch lines, became uneconomical. So they went bankrupt. Next slide. And part of that bankruptcy was related to the grain industry. that the way the whole transportation of grain happened, it became very uneconomical. So this is modern era now. And you have this grain elevator that has a central core of concrete. And as they added to it to increase capacity, we talked about the need for increased capacity, they used metal. And the train now is a unit train, basically. Go ahead, next. This is a perfect example. This could be a coal station. This could be a power station. Could be a coal mine for continuous loading. Big balloon track. Train moves through slowly. They can load the cars while they're moving. This is a continuous trough, or essentially continuous trough. You just needed one person to handle that aspect of it. That train moves very efficiently. It's going to get somewhere at least twice as rapidly as single cars or 4 or 5 cars that end up having to stop in intermediate yards. Now, the definition of a unit train is it has dedicated power as well as a unit of cars going from a single place to a single site and back. So the first unit train actually was many, many years ago in the Northwest, and excuse me, in the Great Lakes region. The lakes froze over, but you still wanted to move to, as it turns out, Buffalo. And they had unit trains going from the Midwest to Buffalo and then transportation beyond. So the unit train concept was an old one, started with 47, don't ask me why it was 47 car units. Next one. So grain production goes from 80 million tons in the turn of the 1900s to 2 years ago, 520 million ton production. And this just says what happened in each decade. But to move that much grain over a rail system that's actually fewer miles than it was in the 1900s just shows how efficient all these changes were. They all fed each other. If the railroads didn't adapt, they wouldn't have expanded as fast because they wouldn't have had a market. The domestic market doesn't support this. This is the international market that's doing it. So it's a very interesting interaction between farming and transportation, and then the development of an external market. Go ahead, next slide. So, okay, we're finished with modern times. Now, what do we do with all these huge concrete eyesores that, as I said, are very expensive to destroy? Well, you do what lots of people do. You know, it's the opposite of graffiti on the sides of boxcars. So this is actually in Europe, in Serbia, on the Danube, and the entire complex has been turned into a recreational site, you know, outdoor marketplace, outdoor restaurant, all that kind of stuff. Next slide. This is Buffalo, and then the next slide. They have an external light show. I apologize for this being fuzzy, but they changed the lighting on it. Next slide. This is in Michigan, and this is actually still a functioning one, but they've made it less of an eyesore. Excuse me? And again, you can see that a lot of the stuff is external. The elevator is external. They don't have the typical, they have a typical head house here with multiple funnels to direct the process grain somewhere, but it's sort of a hybrid. Next slide. Toledo. I mean, I think this is just fascinating. I don't know if anyone wants to, you've seen that one?
Temple's got one that they constantly repaint. It goes down 35.
This has 2 head houses, you can see. Next one. Australia.
That's cool.
You like that one? I mean, it's just fascinating that this whole thing is designed to be a little bit more pleasing. What you can see here rail line, they can load to there, and I'm sure that there's something to load their roads, so I would think trucks may be loaded too. You know, Australia is the United States with fewer people and bigger spaces. So they do things in a different direction than we do, opposite the way Europe does it differently than we are. That goes, next slide. So this is the Purina complex downtown. And it's actually a mill. And that's a whole other story about how you handle that kind of stuff. And I didn't know it, I'm not surprised I didn't know it, but making animal feed is much more complicated than making the flour for bread. So that ends up with another complexity, but they have the bins for storage and or blending, and then they have the mill, and they have all the external pipes to move everything around. And animal feed, all that stuff actually gets produced and bagged and then trucked somewhere primarily. But that's another whole, and I don't know anyone, I've not seen any layouts that talk about that aspect of the industry, which is a whole other complex thing. Yeah, I mean, but you know, this is still functioning because it's a mill. It's just not a grain elevator. It's a mill. West?
Yeah, east.
East? I don't know. You know, I was
Yeah, they tore down.
when
The one I'm thinking of was just built in the last couple of years.
I have I don't know how many slides, probably 24 slides of grain elevators when I was trying to decide what I wanted it to look like. And anytime I went on a trip, I would take a picture of something in Dalhart or Dumas or in the middle of nowhere. And then I said, you know, I'm an idiot. We have the one on Beach Street, I think it is. There's an elevator on Beach, forgetting the big ones up in Saginaw, but they're everywhere in Texas and in eastern Colorado.
Downtown Denton. Downtown Denton.
Right, they're everywhere. Anyway, but most of these are, and most of them, if you look at them on the grain elevators, they're horizontal changes in the way they weathered. And I think that's the last slide. And that we have one end slide. Yeah. So I hope that interested you. Didn't give you the more detail. I have a request because I've been asked to give this talk at the National in Chattanooga. So constructive criticism is welcome. Mike?
I want a little color. I graduated from Hutchinson High School. For that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Almost certainly built there because it's on the main line Santa Fe. It's a regional.
Right.
Collection. Couple of interesting. They did offer tours of the theater. And you got to go see them shake the cars. It's amazing. It was all boxcars back that we're all real old.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
They were all boxcars with side plates in them. And the side plates, by the way, were affixed. They were nailed. So they didn't fall in while they were filling up. They could fill the car only as high as those side plates.
Right.
So that's why they couldn't fill them all the way up. The car would be in sink one car at a time, and it would turn it to the side, and then up to the end. It would do it in all directions. It was an amazing piece of machine.
Yeah. And
as far as model, the large ones don't have round silos. If you look closely at the picture, those are rectangular or square silos. Placed edge to edge, so they have a diamond kind of configuration. But at the time I was there, it was the longest grain elevator. It got surpassed, but it was a really interesting. You could tell that it was harvested because they would marshal boxcars from all over the system. The yard in Hutchinson would fill up to the with boxcars waiting to be loaded. They do 30 or 40 cars a day, running them through that head house, emptying them into the elevator.
Thanks. So I'll have to take you to Tennessee with me, and you can be a shill in the audience. Dave?
The one slide of the Saginaw River that's still in service.
Yeah.
I was born in Saginaw. So
Ah.
I'm familiar with that area, but those are bean on there. Navy bean.
Navy beans. Yeah, the term grain is really a misnomer. I mean, soybeans aren't grain either. Yes.
For those of you that shop at Albertsons, there is up in the Panhandle on Highway 67 between Canyon and Hereford, actually around Umbarger and Dawn, there is a different type of grain structure. It's a truck to rail, and they bring the grain in on cars. They transload it to trucks, and they truck it about 10 miles north to Panhandle Milling, where the flour for Albertsons is made. And that elevator that's up there is not on any rail line. It's 10, 15 miles off a rail line. Got pictures if you want to add that to that.
Sure.
There's other parts of this.
Sure. Just feel free. I'd love to expand it. Yes.
Couple of modeling details I noticed, like the grain elevator at Main and Allen, between the Main and the Santa Fe track. On the track side, when I started rail fanning, yes, guys, this is after the steam era. The track was tilted, so when the 40-foot box went in there, it was automatically tilted. Then they ripped the door off,
Right.
and dropped it. They had a scoop system on cable that the guys would pull the grain out of the car with. Another detail on the street side of that elevator was a tilting mechanism for the grain truck. And I hope you had your brakes set when they started to make it.
Well, as I was alluding to, I mean, the industry changed at all steps. So for the grain trucks, they became semis. They would dump. I mean, the whole thing changed. It's fascinating how they changed in sequence. The only thing I can think of that's changed in a similar fashion is garbage pickup. I mean, the people who invented the wheeled carts, they wouldn't do work by themselves without a truck that had the arms to pick them up and dump them, lift them up on top and dump them. So the whole industry changed. Or the container industry. Containers were around for a lot longer before they become ubiquitous. There's the locking system, the development of ships, all those kinds of things had to happen more or less simultaneously, which meant a lot of capital had to be invested to change that. And it became more efficient as it got larger. Was another hand? Yes, Tom.
Disclosure, I am a Rock Island modeler, so I don't want to be.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, but he's sitting back. I'm sitting in the back. Yeah. Couple things. Growing up in Iowa in the 60s and 70s, there were times across Iowa and wherever where there was so much grain, they actually just poured it on the ground outside the elevators in big things. And even though it got wet, that didn't affect the moisture as much. Most of it was internal.
Right.
Okay. There were a lot of branch lines in Iowa, and during that same period, the government stepped in and offered to fund the rebuilding of a bunch of branch lines specifically for helping out with grain. Okay. I had a good friend who worked for the Chicago Northwestern in Iowa in real estate, and they would offer to build extend the siding in order to do that. But the minimum was you had to be able to hold 25 covered hoppers. That was the minimum number they wanted to mess with for a switch.
Which is 50 boxcars.
Yes, yes. And Dr. Mike talked about staging them boxcars. In the fall, they were always trying to find a place to hide empty boxcars to get ready for the grain rush. And then finally, the Rock Island actually did have a north-south main line, ran from Minneapolis, St. Paul, all the way down to Galveston. And the big competition during that time were the barges on the Mississippi River.
Which is even cheaper.
And so that was the other thing that drove the railroads being the covered hoppers or whatever and unit trains, was they were trying to compete with this, I'll say, government subsidized river system with their grain credit. So anyway.
Thank you.
One thing Dr. Mike alluded to was the coopering of the doors. The Signo company made coopering kits. And the crew would come along and toss the kit into the boxcar door. They would hire high school guys to cooper the cars. And a friend of mine did that. He said, you take your ladder and you put it up against the door and you walk up into the car, take your ladder, put it inside of the car, cooper the inside of the car, toss your hammer and tools out, take the ladder, climb up to the top, pull the ladder around, put it out the other side, and get back down out of the car.
By which time the hopper would have been filled.
Yeah.
The other thing about not filling the boxcars, that also allowed a place for the inspector to crawl in at the elevator to take samples, because the old trust but verify thing.
Right.
They would take new samples from each thing to make sure that they were buying grain that had the, correct moisture content.
Right. Appreciate all the comments. Thank you very much.
Harold, great presentation. It generated a lot of questions and comments. Thank you very much. Yes, Daryl.
We're experiencing a lot of rain out here. Okay, I put down a drawbridge, so to speak, outside the door. You're still going to get your feet wet because it's about 3 inches deep outside the door out here. So just be careful. The boards on that could be slippery. So your footing is, be real careful with that when you go across.
Thank you. So the layout tour is at Jim Packard's layout up in Colleyville tonight, this afternoon. So I have addresses for your GPS, and Jim has maps if he's so inclined. I do want to comment that I was driving in from Weatherford this morning, and I noticed that on the TxDOT billboards, they said I-20 East at
North.
820 North. That ramp is closed. So I did check my Waze GPS system, and it suggested going 35W up north to 30 or 121. You might want to check that and consider that route to get up to Colleyville today after the meeting. Jim, do you have any comments you want to make? Here, let me give you a mic.
Request that they park on the street. I've got a big, long, wide driveway, but if a bunch of cars get in there, the first one in the block and nobody else can get out. So the best way to avoid it is to nobody park on the circular drive. And the second one is, I guess, run like crazy if the rain is like it is.
So it's street parking if you heard him, and it's a pretty, it's a wide residential street. So there's plenty of room. Just hope everybody brought an umbrella.
Two sheets here, one is the written instructions and the other is a map. I've got these, enough of them for anybody that wants one.
So could someone, let me have those, Jim, would you help me pass these out? And anybody want an address, just an address? Stu. You might have two there, but that's okay. Okay, just another comment about Jim Packard's layout. This layout is one of the premier layouts in the area. He's got a light system that goes from morning to evening, accompanied with a sound system. So it's quite a sight to see. Plus the modeling is beautiful. So please, you don't want to miss this opportunity to see the layout. I want to thank everybody for coming. It was a great meeting today, and we'll see you next month. Meeting is on the 14th of March. Mark your calendars, and we'll see you later. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Drive carefully up to Colleyville.